皆さんおはようございます。プラダです。今日のトピックはプロダクトバイプロセス。皆さんおはようございます。プラダです。Today I want to talk about product by process language. Product by process language is generally to be avoided. We don't want to use it too often, but there are some situations where we can use it, and I will explain both in this video today. So first, I'm going to talk about why we should avoid product by process language. It causes two main problems. The first problem is the process steps in the claim are generally ignored by the examiner. So that means if you have specific process steps in your claim, it does not avoid the prior art. So the prior art can be the same product as your product in the claim, made by a different process, and the examiner can still reject your claim. And the second problem is that the process steps are required to infringe the claim. So, for example, if your competitor makes your product, your patented product, and you patented the product by a product by process claim, and they make the product by a different process, they won't infringe your claim. So those are the two main problems. So mainly we will be discussing MPEP 2113 regarding product by process language. And so during prosecution, this portion of the MPEP states, the patentability of a product does not depend on the method of production. If the product in the product by process claim is the same or obvious from a product in the prior art, the claim is unpatentable even though the prior art product was made by a different process. So what does this mean? It means that a product by process claim, it will be more difficult to get a patent because it is easier for the examiner to reject your claim. The reason why it's easier is because the examiner can use prior art that is basically different from your claim. It's the same or very similar product or an obvious product made by a different process. So you have these process steps in your claim. The prior art has different process steps, but the examiner can reject your claim anyway. Now, for infringement purposes, it makes the claim more difficult to infringe. So it's more difficult to patent it and more difficult to infringe. Or you could say it's easier to reject the claim during prosecution, and it's also easier to avoid infringement usually. So here's another paragraph of MPEP 2113. However, in the context of an infringement analysis, a product by process claim is only infringed by a product made by the process recited in the claim. That means if your competitor makes your product with a different process, they will not infringe your claim. They must make the product by the same process in your claim. A product in the prior art made by a different process can anticipate a product by process claim, so that's the prosecution problem. You can get a 102 rejection very easily with a different process in the prior art. However, an accused product made by a different process cannot infringe a product by process claim. That's some strong language. So if you have process language, product by process language in your claims, be very careful how it is being used. Okay, so here's an example. Let's go over an example. And I'm going to go over the In re Marosi case. And it's a case that relates to, it's an oil drilling related patent. And there was it's a chemical compound. And it's made by a particular process. So let's look at that now. Here is an example from MPEP 2113. And this is the case In re Marosi. And here's the citation to it if you want to read the case yourself. The claim that was rejected was a dependent claim, but the case opinion cited the independent claim, which was a method claim. So just so you're not confused, I converted this claim into a product claim so that would be easier to understand the decision in this case. So here's the claim basically. it is a nitrogen-containing crystalline metal silicate. So it's just some compound having this zeolite structure and being essentially free of alkali metal. That's the important point. Essentially free of alkali metal. Remember that, okay? And it's made by the process of, okay, so here's our product right here, and then the process is down here. So it's made by the process of adding this metal oxide, metal hydroxide, metal sulfate, metal nitrate, or hydrated metal oxide and the silicon dioxide. And then this source that is essentially free of alkali metal. And then it has this 5 to 90% strength aqueous solution, hexamethylene diamine here, and then it forms a mixture that is essentially free of alkali metal. But you can ignore most of the language here. You can basically see that this is a product that is essentially free of alkali metal. That is the limitation here. And then there is this adding step, and then making a mixture that is essentially free of alkali metal, and then stirring, this limitation here, whereby said crystalline metal silicate is essentially free of alkali metal. Okay, so it states it a few times here. The main issue here is that this is the process to make this compound that is essentially free of alkali metal. The prior art used a different process, so these steps were different in the prior art, and then the prior art had a step at the end where the alkali metal was removed. The alkali metal in the prior art was removed in a final step. It was an ion exchange step. So basically the prior art did a different process, but it ended up with a compound where the alkali metal was removed. Now, when it was removed, is it enough to be essentially free? And that was the question. So the decision was, even though the process of the prior art is different from the above claim, the claim was rejected because the applicant was not able to show that the prior art product was not essentially free of alkali metal. So here the court was assuming, because you have this removal step, even though the process is different, the final product has alkali metal removed in the prior art. And then the applicant could not show that, well, maybe it removes some, but it's not essentially free. It doesn't remove enough, for example. And the applicant was not able to show that, so the claim was rejected. I hope that example was useful. So continuing on, there are times when we can actually use product by process claims. So when can we use the product by process claims effectively? Well, again, MPEP 2113, the structure implied by the process steps should be considered when assessing the patentability of product by process claims over the prior art, especially where the product can only be defined by the process step. An example of a product that can only be defined by process steps could be some chemical compound. Maybe you don't know the exact structure or the mechanism of how the compound works, but you can make and use it. So in that case, product by process would be very useful because you can't describe the compound any other way or the chemical structure any other way. Another second example is where the manufacturing process steps would be expected to impart distinctive structural characteristics to the final product. So an example here would be if you have a step of grinding or a step of polishing. If you grind a material, you may get a powder, like for example, gomasuri, right? You get kind of it means something different in Japanese, but actual gomasuri is you'll have a powdered sesame seeds, right? But if you did something like polish, I don't know, you say gomamigaki. That sounds kind of weird, but if you polish sesame seeds, they will look different, right? So in that case, you have these two different process steps, and in one case you have powdered sesame seeds, in another case you have very shiny polished sesame seeds. So in those cases, those steps would be very important and should be used in a product by process claim. So in that case, if the examiner cites prior art, for example, your claim site has a grinding step, the prior art has a polishing step. Well, In that situation, the prior art must create the powdered sesame seeds from the polishing step because it uses polishing. So in that case, the examiner should consider your process steps during prosecution. But in general, examiners don't consider the process steps. Okay, well, I hope this video could be useful today. Basically, it was a study of MPEP 2113, Product by Process. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. ありがとうございました。